wouldn't mind reading the Open Public Meeting Act statement.
This meeting is called pursuant to provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of August 5th, 2019 was included on the list of notices sent to the newspapers of record and posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as required notices under the statute. In addition, a copy of the notice has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk.
Excellent, thank you so very much. Folks, we're going to move right into it. Roll call.
And Greenwich Township, Lopakon Township, Alpha Borough, Hohakon Township, Mayor Ellis. Mayor Ellis, Councilman Fulper,
Here.
Councilwoman DiGiovanni.
Here.
Councilman Davis, Councilman McVeigh.
Here.
Councilman Lutz. We have Attorney Galatio, Dennis Yoder, Sandy Calvin, Dan Bransky, and Bob Romo.
Okay, so it appears that we don't have a quorum, which means we can go through our routine. We're not able to take formal action on anything this evening. Okay, so first up, Remington and Verdict, Dennis Yoder. Please feel free. Yeah.
Good evening. Just go over a few of the projects that are ongoing. There's a So the one project, we did replace two of the 5 sludge pumps. Pumps at the beginning of the plant. That's completed, and we're finishing up replacing one of the plant water pumps. We are getting quotes for changing out a base for that pump, because I got a quote in that came a little high, so I'm getting 2 other pricing on that. So those are really the only active projects that we also are bidding out spare part replacement project. So we'll be going out with quotes and bids on that in August on that portion of work. As far as the sewer system, down there, there's a stream crossing. We're actually going to be televising, getting quotes in to televise a section of a pipe there. And we looked at the stream, and the pipe's actually acting as a dam, and we want to see what the integrity of that pipe is. If it's a situation where there's a lot of extraneous flows going in through that pipe, we're going to have the pipe slip line. And I should have the information in September for that. As far as needs at the plant, currently they took the grid system out of service. Basically, it wasn't to be able to repair. The plant can run without the grid system, but over time you do start accumulating grid in your primary clarifiers. So it's something that I will tell you, I'll get back to you with what a cost would be to put a replacement system back in there. But it's one of the things you're going to have to consider as far as capital project planning in the future. Also, if you go out that plant, you're going to see that the conveyor from the sludge dewatering is really on its last leg, and you really can't get parts. Last time they were able to manipulate things, but I'll also get a price for replacing that. That's something that's probably in the $50,000 to $100,000 range to get new conveyors in there. And then the final thing out there, you have 2 areas, Mercer Street and Market Street, where there's these old airlift pump stations. And again, the compressors go on those, and they're about $18,000. So I'll get back to you what it would be. It's very old technology, so I'll get back to you what the options would be for replacing that also. So those are some of the projects that are out there that are pending that we need to consider for the system. And obviously, there's a lot of things on the system end also, as far as reducing the extraneous flows, because DEP is certainly tracking that and monitoring to see what kind of actions you got done. Now, on the favorite topic, the odor control project. There was actually a conference today with DEP enforcement because of the number of complaints that they're getting from the residents. They're out there, and they're actually going to start fining the town up to $15,000 per incident, pending what goes on. So we asked about if we got there and meter with them and show that there's no, they said it's a nose test. If they determine that there's odor there and that a resident signs an official complaint, the town will be fined accordingly. So that's something new is today. They also said they're probably going to come back and make you do air permitting for all your tanks at the wastewater treatment plant. Currently, there is no air permitting requirements, but it's something that, as at the conference call today, that they're likely to come back and require. As far as the various metering stations, unless there's questions, we'll get to questions. On the metering stations, Roseberry finally got their meter in, and it was surprising that the first month of flow that we got in July here, the numbers were a lot higher than, so they've had a lot of development and things happening, so we're going to be getting actual real numbers now from Roseberry. Unfortunately, both Alpha and POHAC-Con had a temporary glitch in their meter, so we'll be doing estimated flows there. Alpha's meter also went, and they are in the process of going out for quotes for that. But again, we're back into, we went back and looked, and some of their flows were dropping off, and it seemed obvious that the meter was not functioning properly. They agreed to go out and get pricing to fix it. I think their first quote came in a little higher than they wanted to, so they're looking at what they need to do to get that corrected. But again, now we're back into doing estimated flows for other districts also. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, Council Vice President.
It was Alpha and Lopakon.
Alpha and POHAC.
It was POHAT, and the estimated flows, is that based on historical numbers, or is it
Yes.
based on your subject matter expertise on what could be going on in those townships and in the now?
Yeah. So we basically look at previous history, maybe the same type of month or period of the year before, and then we look at rainfall data and we try and make a fair estimate based on that. And if it's just for a couple of months and all, you can make yourself one. But something like Lopakon went 2.5 years without having a meter there. Now, what data are you using? But for Lopakon, they did come back and question some of the numbers. We agreed to, on one of the months, to drop a little bit because we had bumped it up a little bit.
Excellent, thank you for your response.
Let me just add that the estimate that they use for the meter when it fails has to be approved by the engineer and the sender and the receiver to the town, and then the effective municipality.
Microphone, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that under the agreements with the sending districts, when you do an estimate for the meter that's malfunctioning, the sending district engineer and the receiver engineer have to agree on the estimate.
We always send out monthly data to all the sending districts so we get that information, and then they obviously have a right to question it if we're doing estimated reads, but for the most part, we haven't had too many questions.
Councilman.
Yes.
Okay.
It failed my nose test last night, miserably.
Yeah, the DEP inspector was out there between 9 and 11, and they basically said there was definite odors issues there. Now, they rank them 1 to 5. I don't know what they gave on their scale of the rankings. They didn't tell us that information.
Depends what part of town you were in.
Actually, the DEP did not verify any odor complaints up to this point at any residential home. Had them over for coffee.
So, just to be clear, all right, we just can't scream from the crowd. However, Spransky, I will answer your question. I live on Mill Street. It failed my nose test as well. So,
I'm not contesting that. What I'm saying is, DEP informed us today, and I asked the question specifically.
right, it just means that
Have
they weren't
there
out.
been any
at that time.
validated complaints?
Yeah, so their validated complaint is they actually have a resident sign a form saying that there's an odor at this site, and then they go back and verify that it is where it's coming from.
Okay.
And that becomes an official complaint. Them being out there, noticing doesn't start the violation process, is when they have an official record of a signed complaint from a resident which they verify. That's when the fines start coming.
Councilman, I apologize.
Well, I was there about 7:30 last night, is when I went downtown. And I can tell you, from Sawmill all the way up onto Personal Hill, it was significantly noticeable. It wasn't too bad right by the plant, because I drove up to the plant, the gates were all closed, but down by Sawmill, it was bad. It was bad. It was even worse up on the hill.
Right.
So where are we at with the deodorizers that were being used previously?
Well, if I may, Dan's going to explain what he's been doing to try to control the odor, and as I shared with you earlier, Dennis is going to follow with the solution.
Okay. Well, that will answer your question. Let's hope.
Right now, we're adding what's called a product called VX463. VX463 is a sodium hypochlorite-based compound. We then add that to the digested sludge, run it through the thickeners, and then it's stored in the yeast aeration tank, or yeast aerated digester. So that's what we're doing in addition to hauling sludge. That was what we did last year and the year before as well.
So you're hauling it away?
Yes.
At the beginning of the year, we allocated $60,000 for additional sludge hauling to try to get it out of the plant.
So the other day, there was about 4 or 5 trucks there. They weren't actually pumping in, they were pumping out.
They're pumping out.
Move in as quick as possible.
So help me understand, we have to pump this out to get it out of here. What's the alternative? Can it be fully treated at the facility, or?
It is fully treated.
Okay.
The problem is that there's no odor control at the facility. The facility infrastructure was constructed in the 1950s and 60s. At the point in time the digesters were originally installed, they were anaerobic digesters. They were covered. However, they never had a flare. So that gas was constantly being vented into the air, which was the original source of the odors. Sometime in the 90s, they were cleaning the digester. The digester had a catastrophic failure. As a result, they removed the lids from the digester. At that point in time, they installed aerators into the digester. They ran from roughly 1988 to 1992, at which point in time the odor complaints got so bad that they shut the aerators off in the system. Unfortunately, the vessels are permitted as aerobic digesters, not sludge holding tanks. Okay? So as part and parcel of us preparing for the upgrade, which was coming in 2015, I then took down the east digester, repaired the aerators, examined the aerators on the west digester, because there's a net loss of 10% of iron oxide per year, and that goes into the sludge. The problem with iron oxide and anaerobic or anoxic sludge that exists without much oxygen in it, is if the bond breaks in the iron oxide, which is paint pigment, particles of iron, fall to the bottom of the tank. Without air, without mixing, I won't be able to pump anything and it'll fill the digester up with iron. So, with that 10% loss in place, in 2014 I moved to exercise that unit. In 2014 in May, I energized that. And for 6 days, it was nothing but complaints. The problem was I needed the 7th day. On the 6th day, we had reached 6.87 on the pH to try to get it up from 5. In order for me to break the cycle of the sulfide production, I need to be over 7. On the 6th day, Mayor Wyant gave me a call and said the newspapers are coming down. I think we need to shut it down. I begged for one more day because I believed I could have broken that cycle at that time, but there was no way. It just was not sustainable. So as a result, we then put the new system in. We then have to aerate both of those tanks in order to, A, meet our requirements for our sludge concentrations going out of the plant. We can't be greater than 4% going out. And in order for me to keep the tank mixed so I didn't clog the pumps. Eventually I reached a point where there were one of two choices. Take the hired head on the west digester and push it into the east digester to try to open it up, hopefully, or aerate. So we chose to put the air in the west digester and try to maintain a moderate roll on the east digester. The problem is that in this 1960s vintage design, they installed three 300 horsepower blowers that have a common header to both those tanks. So the only way to control the airflow and distribution in the two main tanks that produce the odors is to throttle a valve. The problem is path of least resistance. When the tank begins to rise, as it can, because I don't just waste one time a day, I waste for 3 minutes every hour. So for 3 minutes every hour, this tank is static, this tank is rising. Eventually what happens is there becomes an air distribution disequalization and more air starts going to the other side of the tank. It produces more odors as a result because now you're stirring up this heavily concentrated digested sludge. In an attempt to control that, the digesters typically, and for example, when United Water left, the operational level of the digester was between 7 feet and 8 feet. That was the normal operational level of that digester. When United Water came in, it was at 7 feet. When United Water left, it was at 7 feet. So the operational level now is, since I've been here 10 years now, has always been between 7 and 8 feet. We, in an attempt to control the odors, began to pull the digesters down. We added everything from potassium permanganate to sodium permanganate to polymers, lime, mag hydroxide. Nothing to control it. Nothing. We'd get a little bit of a headway and then we'd lose it. We couldn't maintain the pH. So we began looking at alternative products. In the collection systems, one of the common ways to control odors and hydrogen sulfide from destroying the concrete pipe and the rebar and exposing the rebar is to add what's called bioxide into a collection system. We attempted to use bioxide. The problem with bioxide is it just isn't strong enough to handle the concentrations of sulfides in processed sludge. So we shifted gears and went to, for example, a much stronger form of this compound. The problem is, in order for me to make it work, I have to keep the digester at 4 feet. I can't operate it anymore at 7 feet. Each digester holds 250,000 gallons of material. So now I have to reduce the operational level of the digester, which requires trucks. So each time I load a truck, that's more odors. So we've lowered the level now to 4.5 feet. If I can keep the level at 4.5 feet, and conditions, environmental conditions are favorable, I can maintain the odor level close to the plant and not have it escape everywhere. The problem that I have, and you made note of it earlier, is that I go out with an H2S meter, and this is what the state told me. I go out with H2S meters, I get, for example, at the sawmill plant, I got 3 parts per million. At the main plant, I got 3 parts per million. On South Main Street, right at the front gate, I got 1. On Hill Street, 1. Mill Street, 0. Purcell, 0. Sayre, 0. Limekiln, 0. Sawmill, 0. I've done this every time I've gotten a phone call. Unfortunately, I don't get all the phone calls. So I keep a record of these. I keep a data log record from the H2S meter as well. Unfortunately, the state doesn't base this decision on the scientific basis of a meter. They use the olfactory system, your nose. The problem I have is regulations are parts per million. The human nose can smell in parts per billion. So if someone's not exposed to it, anything greater than 5 to 6 ppm, you have olfactory shutdown. By 10, you can't smell anything. You don't smell the hydrogen sulfide. So we know that the concentrations are below the time-weighted average for motion. So there are no deficit or harm to human life. That means by time weighted, they mean you need to be in that concentration for 8 straight hours before there's any negative effect. We're nowhere near those readings. So we readily admit that the odors are probably coming from me. I'm more than willing to admit that. However, the thing to remember is that you have McWayne Ductile, which was fined $67,000 for blowing out the bag house and spewing hydrogen sulfide into the air. You have a waste hauler that sits down at the end. You have a recycler that sits down in the end, and I've had conflict with one of the members of the council telling me it was me with the cherry smell when it turned out to be a recycler recycling barrels. So while I'm more than willing to accept the responsibility for us being the cause, the simple reality is that the plant does not have the infrastructure as it exists now to handle the flows that we have coming in with the process that we run. We just can't control it. I can't control it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's impossible. The only way to control it is the odor study and the proposals that were made. That's why they were designed. That's why we started looking at these things in 2015. We need to cover the tanks. It's the only way that we can minimize the odors coming from that facility. Additionally, the flows to the plant have gone up 28% since 2017, along with increased loading. We average 2.4 million gallons. Now we're over 3.5. We haven't had 1 month in this year where the average flow has fallen below 3 million gallons. So what's interesting is the loading is the same. Now we receive septage. Okay, we take septage in from the service area. That septage, I calculated at 10,000 milligrams per liter. When you measure it, it's much less than that. By that I mean almost a magnitude in some cases. So using the base for the septage that was received, my loading continues to rise, the septage being eliminated from that calculation. Likewise, no single month since 2017 has been lower than the month before. So if I look at January 17, regardless of the rain, the flow is up in 18 and 19. Each month is going up and up and up. So the loading to the plant is physically increasing. Now,
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry to cut you off. We've seen a lot of backups on the Secretary Street area where the street's been flooding. Is there anything we need to worry about with regard to the content within that water?
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
the water that could be going into someone's basement could be contaminated.
What's most likely is that you have interconnected storm and sanitary lines, okay? The Phillipsburg at one time had a combined sewer system, just like Passaic and Patterson, okay? They were supposed to have separated that out. What that physically means is going here, all right, we've got to break this line, this is now sanitary, this is going to the river. But what we've seen, especially of late, is that there's what should be storm water has fecal coliform in it, as well as debris. And likewise, some of the sanitary lines have stormwater in it. So we've never been, as far as I can tell, it appears that the systems are still interconnected. So we have the ability, let's say up near Sitgrave Street, okay? Especially in some of those abandoned properties back there, it should all be stormwater. Yet it's not. What's tied into it? So now what do? Do you let that go to the river once you find it? No, you have to put it into the sanitary because it's sanitary waste. But it's also a major portion of roof leaders and sump pumps. In a high flow event, in a rain event, a moderate rain event, if I eliminated all the sump pumps out of Phillipsburg, it'd save me 1 million gallons a day in a high flow event. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but that's just the sump pumps. That's not counting the roof leaders and everything else. And I've spoken to a lot of the plumbers that service this area, and there are numerous cross connections, acknowledged, known cross connections between the residents, homes, and either the sanitary or the stores. We don't really know which one is connected because we've never televised the entire line to see what's connected.
Bransky, I don't want to cut you off. I did
No.
Did that answer your question?
Just one question as a follow-up, well, maybe two. In regards to covering the tanks, you said it would minimize the odor, not eliminate. Were there options to eliminate any and all odor coming from the plant?
Dennis has.
I do have this study at home. I just saw it.
No, Dennis has that.
So we had recommended a two-phase approach, because 85% of the odors are probably coming from the 2 sludge holding tanks and then the biomag holding tank, and possibly out of the solids handling building. So there is an option where we could just, instead of doing the bio air where we're running it through a biological filter, we could actually just cover the tanks, and there's an ozone spray system that would bind up the odors and basically squash the odors from those tanks. But we're estimating it somewhere, based on our testing, somewhere between 80 and 85% of the odors are from those sources. So our recommendation is for project 1, just to target those areas. You still have the headworks, you still have your primary clarifiers that are areas that are generating odors too. But we go back to the headworks area, which is pretty much a canopy over that structure at this point, and trying to enclose that and then capture the air and treat that. That was looking to be like over another $1 million, but yet it's not the primary source. I think if we can focus on those sludge tanks, get those covered. Originally, we were looking at a time frame, if you're going through the I-Bank for funding, which is, so that we did put an application in, it's the application sitting there. But that was almost like an 18 months to a 2-year period if you fast-tracked it. So if we wanted to just cover the tanks and do something with a different type of system, we probably could, but again, that would come down to how you're going to fund it to make that happen. But you know, if our target is to have something in place for next year, so you don't get in the summer months with the hot weather and have the same situation, it's something you really need to get moving on soon. But again, you know, it comes down to, you know, we were hoping to settle with the sending districts, have that, and it just keeps lingering on. So that was like deferring everything, and here we are. So the hottest month, you know, summer in a while, and it's certainly taking its effect on the odor control. But DEP is definitely aware, and unfortunately they're going to come down. If the fines start piling up, they'll make you probably have to negotiate your consent decree with them with some kind of commitment to address the situation. So that's the directions.
Dennis, could you explain to everyone what type of membrane you put over the yeast digester?
Yeah. So the question is, is there something we can do immediately? You know, there is landfill type membrane covers that you can stretch over there. I'm not a big fan of that because even though they're a little bit permeable, you know, the last thing you want them dropping down in. But if we really got forced to do something, you can get some type of a expandable cover there that would have the pin on there. Again, now you're putting a lot of dollars towards a temporary solution and not the permanent solution. But again, if it's saving you the fines and things, maybe that's a test route to go. But you have to have air exchanges going in and out, so that air has to go somewhere else. You have to do something underneath to deal with the various odors that are being generated.
How soon can you speak with the members on?
I'd have to talk to contractors and see, what's out there and all, but obviously not going to happen this summer. It might be, into the fall until you see that. The cost may be prohibitive for short term when you're looking at maybe $200,000 per tank to cover them versus doing this temporary solution. I'd have to see where the pricing would come in for that. But it's something that obviously when you start getting snow loads in the winter, you wouldn't want a non-structured type cover on there.
Are we paying something like $60,000 a month?
Last year, we paid $200,000 to move sludge. This year, it's $60,000 for just July and August. Dennis, I just wanted to ask you, and Dan, feel free to jump in. The east digester is the major cause of the odors. What if we covered just the east digester to get a handle on it?
That would be a start, but the one thing Dan was mentioning as part of the study too is those blowers are antiquated and weigh the system. So you'd almost want to get an individual blower for that. On a VFD, we're wasting a lot of energy anyway. The payback on replacing those blowers is there an energy savings within 5 years. And now you're going to have much better control. You're not going to be having a lot of additional air going into that system, which is creating.
How soon can you get us a quote or get the mayor?
Well, I asked Dennis earlier after we had the conference with DEP this afternoon, and no one had any complaints. It was a matter of we have to act. And so Dennis and I were talking, and correct me if I get off track, but it's similar to a pool cover, right? Pool taunt with pumps on top to take care of the water, and then the blowers.
Right.
Yeah. So price, you're going to get to us a proposal?
I would get a price to you right now. I'd be guessing because you're doing it on a fast track basis and things like that.
So, were you finished?
No.
Well, I don't want to cut you off, because folks here this evening, I do want them the opportunity.
If Dennis could
I
give
just
us a
have one last
proposal,
question.
I'll send the proposal up to council for consideration, at least get that east digester. It is the culvert. So it's a start, and we, just like Piosha, we can get DEP to back off a little bit and give the residents,
That's,
a break.
I don't think you'll find an argument here.
Okay, great. So we'll pursue that.
Please.
Thank you.
Councilman. Forster.
I just had one more question, Dennis. Back when, I know there was a capital investment, 2014, 2015, I'm a little on what Dan said. And my understanding was originally you opted to not do the lids at that time because you believed the system you were putting in was going to work. Right? From previous, last year, I'm thinking last year's sewer meeting.
Yes. So that project didn't have anything to do with odor control. It was strictly about putting the plant in a position that.
That was the biomag.
Yes.
Okay.
Ultraviolet.
And the UV disinfection, and also it was reloading. You were getting a phosphorus limit that was 0.3 milligrams per liter.
Mm-hmm.
And by moving the outfall from its current location to within 80 liters of the Delaware River, it was no longer considered discharge to the Low-Pack Creek. And that very stringent phosphorus limit required a lot of treatment and chemicals, which was going to probably add $1 million capital cost plus operating costs of the project. So we were able to relocate that outfall, and the DRVC gave us new limits on it. A future phosphorus limits would be like 2.3 rather than the 0.3 that they were imposed. Right now we don't have phosphorus limits because we moved the outfall. So that was part of that project also.
Thank you. That's it.
Mayor, did you have questions?
No, just what Dennis and I and Dan discussed today, I think we can get, a start on this anyway.
Just so you're aware, I know my emails have come off pretty harsh a lot lately. I want to make it clear that I don't blame Remington and Vernon. I don't blame Mayor Ellis. I don't blame Mayor Wyan. I think this our infrastructure, to put it in layman's terms, that's a child here, so I'm not going to put it in layman's terms. The infrastructure is horrible. Who I blame is those who lack the foresight to consider the fact that Phillipsburg is going to grow, right? There are going to be some tough decisions that we're going to have to make in the future, and I know I spoke with Mayor Ellis earlier today about them. But until then, we need to eliminate the odor issues as much as possible, because there are those on the hill, those on Mercer, Seagraves, those downtown, that they are suffering. I know that we use the term parts per million, parts per billion, and the fact that if the human nose can't smell it or that it's not harmful, but if someone's quality of life is degraded here in the town of Phillipsburg, that's harmful to everyone. It's harmful to them. And Dan, you don't see the tax bills here, right? Yeah, so I gotta tell you, people are paying taxes, smell that. Wait till you see how much they pay. I'll send them over to you.
Well, again,
Dan, I'm poking fun.
No,
That's all.
I realize that the limitations, the last thing I want to do is make someone on the hill have to smell sewage, you know?
It's not just the hill, it's also downtown. I meant the town.
See now, to be honest, this is just me talking,
Sure.
all right? I go down to Sayers Street, the chances of me being the one that's affecting Sayers Street is very slim, okay? I don't want to throw the rocks at Atlantic States,
Sure.
but they've had the issue down there before, in Walters Park, stinking out Walters Park there.
I was
Okay.
there when they did it.
But we're more than willing to accept the responsibility. It is 99% of the time me. But we are making an effort. When someone calls, we try to respond to it. Tom Maxwell and I, we sat down and we said, can we shut the air off at night? The problem is I have to turn the air on in the morning. And I don't think any of us want to be around when I turn that air on after it's been off for 8 hours. Because then the whole bottom end of town.
Then the flip side is then you would have that burst,
Right.
not the concept, so it's.
So I think the first step, obviously, because I want the people to be able to speak, so the first step, obviously, is you would get the quotes to Mayor Ellis.
Right.
We're going to get this fix in place, it's going to come before council. Let's get the fix as fast as, we have to hold another special meeting, I think we have another special meeting for the police department next week.
Right.
If we have to do that as well, to approve that, we can. Let's just get it done. Let's do what we can right now until those decisions that we were speaking of earlier have to be made.
I have just a general question, maybe you can answer it.
I hope so.
Why is it that the outlying districts don't have any responsibility for the generation of the ocean?
So here is what I'm going to tell you. Because we are in litigation, I'm going to defer to the gentleman to my left. Because I'd love to answer that question, but because we are in litigation, I'm not sure that I can. Would you direct me to answer that question or not?
No, I wouldn't.
I didn't think so. So unfortunately, we can't answer that question. Yeah.
But it was asked.
It was asked, and it's on record. I'd love to be able to answer that for you. So at this point in time, I do thank you, gentlemen, for being candid and for coming up and speaking. I'm going to open it up for public comments at this point. So if those have a comment, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and feel free to speak.
Bill Timmon, 230 South Main. On your cap, if that gas that's emanating from there, is that burning? And will that alleviate any of the problem once you cap it off? Like the refineries, they burn off the excess. Will that eliminate some of the odor?
So that's a whole different process. That's what used to be there, anaerobic digestion, where you're creating methane gas. That's different in the H2S odors are gone. We're not creating methane gas, but if we had anaerobic digestion, it would be enclosed, and you would need a flare, and you'd be burning off the gas, or having a cogen situation or something like that, to reuse the gas.
Is it volatile enough to burn?
Not the
Not,
sulfides.
not the sulfides, what we're creating.
Okay.
It's very
Secondly,
explosive, but not, no.
seems
doesn't
like
burn.
It's a different process, which we don't have any longer.
the sending districts don't seem to be interested in attending these meetings. It's the second or the third meeting that they seem to have missed. Plus, as they stated, the flow is getting much larger. Well, Phillipsburg isn't building anything. It seems to be coming from the sending districts. Is there any way that they could be, since I guess that the flow is not metered from a couple of them, that they could be charged more because of the amount of what they're sending into our system?
Bill, I'm gonna, once again, decline to comment the fact that we're under litigation.
I can, that's a simple question that can be answered without.
Care.
Doc, Sandy.
The sending districts are billed on a per gallon basis. So the more that they contribute to the plant, the more that they pay. So they are paying.
Understandable, but if they're not recording or sending the amount of flow to our plant, and we're still billing them at a previous rate, it seems like they're not here, they're not making their repairs. I would increase the amount to pay for it to offset some of the costs that it's going to take to repair it. And or force them into, say, hey, it's time you put your own system in because you're overloading ours.
Yeah, there are contracts that establish what happens when the meter does not work. So we follow what's in the contracts.
Yeah, but I've seen, this has been going on now for a year or two, especially the one off of Roseberry Street. I mean, you got a brand new pump station there and brand new meters, but they turn them off. I mean, what good is that? Same thing with Alpha and Poad. If they're not recording it, why are we paying for the sending districts? Why shouldn't they be paying a fair share? Since apparently they're not, and they don't seem to have enough interest to be here.
Mr. Tooman, that's been years.
Well, I understand, but I'm saying, now it's being coming up more and more.
Yeah.
They're still building. Phillipsburg is landlocked for the most part, maybe you put a new house in here or there, but.
OATCON was notified when we saw that it wasn't recording, and they addressed it immediately. OATCON, it was a situation we saw, their numbers didn't make sense, so when we identified that, we went back and changed their numbers, and they became aware of it, and they started the process. So I don't think it's going to be the same as OATCON, where they dragged it over 2.5 years.
Yeah, it seems like you're just ignoring the process, why? And again, we're paying for them sending more excess in. And, I don't know if you can get away with it. I'd fine them for that.
That's it. Later, your time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else? You're not going to speak. She did this all by herself? All right. What's your name and address for the record?
Ariana Nicoletti, and I live on 868 Yale Street.
Okay. It's all yours, kiddo.
The sewer smell ruins every day that I want to go out and play. Sometimes my friends and I don't want to even go out and play. Every day I go out around 8 p.m. and gag on the smell. I'm glad that I don't have a pool because I wouldn't be able to go in it because of the smell. You should please consider fixing the problem so we can enjoy our home.
You did very good.
Thank you.
Very good. I tell you what, every single one of us are going to work very hard to eliminate that smell for you, okay? I'm very, very sorry that you had to deal with that. Okay? You wrote that all by yourself?
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Let's give Ariana a hand. Your name and address for the record.
Chrissy Nicoletti, 868 just want to say, with all due respect, Mr. Mayor, Dan, 2 years ago, we set up at Flynn's, and we had this same conversation. So why wasn't it fixed then? Why do we keep on having the same conversation over and over again? Where my daughter at 9 years old has to complain about the smell. I mean, I don't understand your plans. I mean, it's constant, it goes on, to the point where we make phone call after phone call after phone call. You said there was no phone calls made 2 years ago to the DEP? I myself made that phone call to the DEP 2 years ago. So,
I can only tell you what DEP said to us today, that June 29th this year was the first response that they had. That's exactly what he said.
I mean, 2 years ago, I mean, if you remember, we set up at Flynn's, a whole entire Hill Street set up there. And you told us there was a crack in the lid, and that's where the odor was coming from.
I never said that.
No, yes, you did.
No, ma'am, I would never,
Yeah.
I hate to.
Everybody can attest, we were all there.
I would never use.
It's on YouTube.
No one said there was a crack in the lid, there was no lid to have a crack.
Was
So
this a public forum?
Yes.
Like a town hall meeting type?
Yeah, there was a meeting up on Hill Street, and we all went because, I mean, I've lived here 20 years. I've never smelled anything like, you know, we can't even go outside and enjoy our front porch after dinner. It's constant, and everybody here is sick of it. I'm not blaming you, I'm not blaming him. I just want to say, fix the problem. Instead of everybody talking about it, just fix it. That's it.
You don't disagree.
Am I right?
110% correct. I can promise you that we'll be vigilant. Give you my word.
All right.
You know where I live, I think you can come
I
straight
do.
me up. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Liz Polish, 26A Glen Avenue. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. Why don't you start having monthly sewer meetings? Be a little bit more productive, be a little bit more aggressive in handling these situations and facing what the problem is. Having quarterly meetings is nothing. Show the people that you're willing to address the issues. Okay, notice of violations. What's been done about them?
With regard to the sewer?
Discharging the raw sewage into the Lopakon Creek and the Delaware River. That's been over a year. The Lopakon Creek was May 26th, I think it was, 2017. The raw sewage into the Delaware, 65,000 gallons, was February and March of 2018. Those notice of violations are still open and pending. What's been done? Or are you going to wait until the DEP starts putting pressure on you and threatening to fine you?
No, ma'am. What I would do though is, I'm sorry I don't have that answer for you, but I would ask either Remington Burdick or the mayor, are you capable?
The spill in Lopakon Creek, that was repaired, of course, adequately repaired. The flows to the Delaware River pump station, the force main, has ceased. Am I right, Dan? Would you speak to that?
They apparently diverted flow out of the Stonehenge development to the Route 57 pump station. So that in combination with the fact that we increased the impeller size, I changed the impellers on those pumps. But they actually, I hate to say this because then they'll know. One of two things is happening. Either they have pumps that have failed, one of the pumps has failed, and they haven't noticed it.
They don't know it.
Low pack at Stonehenge is broken and they don't know it, and it's automatically bypassing to 57, where they have turned it off. Either way, we have not been informed. All we know is that even with all the rain, 10.5 inches, we did not overflow.
We didn't reach capacity.
Okay, so what's the response to DEP as far as the notice of violations, and why is it still open then and pending? I saw notes on there about the collection system. How is the collection system being addressed?
We don't take care of the collections.
Yeah, I know, that is a huge mistake.
We're moving in a new direction on collections. We're going to try to make it more efficient and effective and get cameras in there and start making repairs. I've been talking with Dennis Yoder and talking to Dan. I need to present you a letter. I need to present council a letter to accept the new direction we're going to head.
So the plan will be
We
to
recognize the
identify
time
the
lapse.
low areas, the in-ground streams, and start with that, targeting, investigating those areas, and then also doing follow-up repair work in those areas, rather than trying to do the whole system, come up with a library, and then go back. So you're going to target areas that you think that are going to be good return on investment, focus on those, and move forward. So that's the new plan. I know Charlie Calvin also very certain I would not be surprised if there is not some kind of consent order coming down saying that you have to do certain improvements by a certain amount of time. But that is something that's out there pending.
And as the receiver, I should say, what recourse do you have as far as what's being sent to you from the other municipalities when it comes, not, residential sewage really isn't a big problem. It's your commercial, it's your restaurants. How much pressure is being put on the county to inspect those racetracks? And how often are those sewer lines being inspected from the other municipalities?
I would say not, and in fact, some of the problems we had down at Riverside Way with fats, oils, and grease coming down
There you go.
clogging that station has really been problematic.
You should have rules and regulations in place that specify what happens when you are receiving this from the other municipalities, and if they exceed this, or if they're not in compliance, there are consequences.
So, I had to let you know your time was up.
I know.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
But I will say, I don't know how the rest of the panel feels, but I am not opposed to having monthly meetings regarding the sewer until the odor control issue is fixed.
Well, it's not just the odor control.
Well,
I mean,
I'm also
you've got
concerned about
a multitude
the
of
sewer
problems.
issues
Yeah.
downtown as well. But I do think that right now I need to focus on eliminating the odor control.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of infrastructure issues. Like I said, I spent a long time this morning talking to Mayor Ellis about rectifying a lot of these issues. It does come with a plan. I think we're going to discuss it this evening. I will do the best to keep the public apprised.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I believe we don't have an executive, no? I got a motion? Yes, sir, please, please. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize, please. My first time standing up here, so I apologize. Peter J. Werfel, 339 Purcell Street. Some of my questions have already been answered from these two gentlemen over here tonight, so I apologize if they're a little redundant. I'll start off by saying I don't want to be here tonight, all right? I would much rather be home spending time with my wife and kids. Why are we here? Does anybody deny that there is a problem with the sewage plant? What is the argument? Is anyone here tonight in defense of the sewage plant to state there is no odor or pollution problem? I think the answers to these questions are obvious to anyone who lives in my neighborhood or drives down Main Street. It isn't due to the warm weather. It's simply unbearable most nights to enjoy any outdoor activities. Some of my neighbors who are here tonight told me that they chose not to set up their patio furniture for the first year. They've lived here since 1978. I've lived in my home on Purcell Street since 2001, and I would say the problem started about 2 years ago. And I actually called the town and I spoke with one of the gentlemen to my left. Very nice guy, very informative. I was at work and he probably gave me way more information than what I called for. But he did tell me, and this was a year ago, that some of the, one of the workers broke a lid, and that was the problem with the smell. I will tell you that much. So I'm in agreement with the lady twice before me there. And that was the reason for the smell. Also, he said that the state had changed some of their guidelines as far as the amount of nitrates that were allowed to be discharged. So they had to hold the sewage in the tanks longer. And I asked him what I could do to help, because it's ridiculous, it really is. Is not being able to go outside. I have a swimming pool at home. Come 7:30, I gotta go inside. It's unbearable until about 9 o'clock. I heard one of the councilmen say that it's like after 9. It seems like it subsides at my place around 9. Is there a lid on Odor, and will it help? That's one of the questions. I'm not sure if that was the answer tonight. Will it fix the problem? Is there a realistic answer? Is there anyone leading with this issue? Do we have a leader? If anybody has any questions or comments for me, I would like for them to contact my confidential assistant, AKA my wife, Lori. She can easily be reached via Facebook Messenger. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
I feel almost compelled to address the issue.
If you want to address the issue, because we're about to adjourn to go to council meeting.
Okay.
If there's no one else that wishes to speak.
Yes, why?
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Ms. Branston, it's not that, it's just that we have to start a council meeting. If you wish, you're more than welcome to do it. Go ahead and follow it, okay? We did take a little over the council meeting. Are you staying? All right, excellent. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
I gotta shake